Think of the prayer you close the rosary with. You pray it, but it was never made for that. It was made to be sung in the dark by men going off to sleep. Hail, Holy Queen, Mother of Mercy. That one, the Salve Regina. Notice, when a priest is buried, this is the prayer the Church sings over him. Now go back 800 years and picture yourself inside a monastery, already night. The last prayer of the day is over. One by one, the chapel candles are put out, and the cold air holds the smell of burnt wick. Watch the monks rise from the worn wooden benches and take, in single file and without speaking, the stone corridor that leads to the dormitories. They sing as they walk, and what they sing is not a hymn of triumph. Listen. A low voice, the voice of a tired man, striking the stone wall of a building already almost entirely dark. And listen to what it says. A prayer that calls a woman by the name of the highest office there was in their world, Queen. That was not poetic license. Before closing their eyes, that was the word they made a point of saying last. Quick question for you. When was the last time you prayed the Salve Regina? Go to the comments and write down the place. You will see, in dozens of languages, the answer is almost always the same. In the car, in the kitchen, sitting on the edge of the bed, never noticing the first name the prayer gives her. If you are carrying a request, write it down too. Someone so worried they cannot sleep, a priest who is in need of prayer. And then, if you have your phone in your hand, treat this story the way those monks treated their prayer. Do not leave it inside the church. From the corridor to the bed, they went on singing. So do this right down below. Drag the comments to the left and you will run straight into a button that says Hype. Tap it, and this story lands in the hands of someone who has never heard of it. Halfway through this video, you will see a king step down from his throne and bow before a woman, with the whole court watching. And we are not talking about his wife. Keep an eye out for that scene. Let us go back to the corridor. The prayer those men sang in the dark, you know by heart. It is the Salve Regina. It is what closes the rosary, what closes the month of May, what closes your grandmother's wake. And notice something that slipped by for 800 years. Queen is the first name the prayer gives her. Not mother, not lady. It is Queen. And that comes before everything else the prayer will say. Now, the fact this whole video exists for, notice what was missing while they sang. In the calendar of the church, there was no feast of Our Lady the Queen. No decree, no encyclical, no date set. Think about it. For more than 1,000 years, in the prayers before sleep, Christian people were already calling Mary Queen, and Rome went on saying nothing. Today's feast, the 22nd of August, is the most recent piece of this whole story. It is only 72 years old. You only understand the delay, and you only understand why it came from the bottom up when it finally came, if you begin with the prayer and not with the doctrine. If you had walked into the Abbey of Cluny in 12th century Burgundy, you would have recognized the Salve Regina. Its form was already very close to what it is today, and nobody knows who wrote it. For centuries, you would have heard 3 or 4 answers to that question. An 11th century German monk, Saint Bernard, 1 or 2 more names. Modern research knocked each one of them down, and the consensus among scholars today is that the prayer is anonymous. You pray one of the most widespread prayers in the Christian world, and it belongs to no one. What is known is the place where they sang it, and the place says more than a name would. They sang it at Compline.
Hold on to the name, Compline, from the verb to complete, to finish. It is the last hour of the divine office, the prayer that closes the day. After it, in the monasteries, the silence of the night falls, and nobody speaks again until the next morning. And what the records kept is this: they started the chant while still inside the chapel, and did not stop singing until they reached the dormitories. It is worth seeing what that means in practice.
Picture that man. He has spent the day working the soil, copying a book or caring for the sick. His hands are cold and he is sleepy, and he is crossing a stone corridor in the dark. The last thing he does before lying down is sing to a mother. That is not ceremony. It is what you do at the bedroom door. The Cistercians took up this daily chant in the year 1218, and they have never stopped since. That is 800 years singing the same thing every night.
A decade later, in Bologna, the Dominicans began turning it into a night procession inside the friary. The practice spread so fast that Pope Gregory IX, on the advice of a Spaniard the Church now calls Saint Raymond of Peñafort, ordered the same to be done in the churches of Rome on Fridays. And here, the prayer leaves the monastery and falls into the world. It became the sailor's prayer. Men who went months without seeing land sang it on deck at night, and it entered the ritual for the blessing of a ship.
The priest blesses the hull, and the crew sings the Salve Regina before setting sail. It makes sense that this was the one they chose. It is a prayer that speaks of exile, of a valley of tears, of the banished, of people far from home. Later, it entered the end of the Rosary, where it remains to this day. At the end of the 19th century, Pope Leo XIII ordered it prayed at the end of every low Mass as well, along with other prayers that came to be known as the Leonine prayers.
For decades, millions of Catholics heard it on their knees every day before leaving the church. When a priest dies, at the end of the funeral Mass, after the final commendation, the assembly sings the Salve Regina. It is the last chant. The coffin is already closed, his brother priests are standing around it, and the church says goodbye to her son, singing the same prayer the monks sang on their way to bed. Notice what that means. It is the prayer of the one going to sleep, and it is the prayer of the one who has died.
For the church, it is the same thing. Someone lying down and handing the rest over to another person. The very text you pray has layers from different centuries, like a building that has been rebuilt. The word mother in the first line seems to have come in only in the 16th century. The word virgin, down at the end, is from the 13th. The prayer grew in people's mouths, and it is so dense that a saint wrote a whole book just to explain it.
Saint Alphonsus Liguori, in the 18th century, wrote The Glories of Mary as a commentary on the Salve Regina, phrase by phrase, a treatise of hundreds of pages on a prayer that fits in 20 lines. And the Salve Regina is not the only one that calls Mary this. Take the Litany of Loreto, the one prayed after the Rosary, with the invocations the assembly answers. Count how many times it calls Mary Queen. 13. Queen of angels,
of patriarchs, of prophets, of apostles, of martyrs, of confessors, of virgins, of all saints.
Queen conceived without original sin. Queen assumed into heaven. Queen of the most holy rosary. Queen of families. Queen of peace. And those invocations were not all born together. They came in over the centuries, and each one marks an hour of history. Queen of the Most Holy Rosary was ordered prayed throughout the Church at the end of the 19th century. Queen conceived without sin came in after the definition of the dogma of the Immaculate Conception. Queen assumed into heaven was added in 1950, right after the dogma of the Assumption was proclaimed. Queen of Peace came in during the First World War, when Europe was falling apart. And the most recent of them all, Queen of Families, was added by John Paul II in the Year of the Family. In other words, every time humanity got into new trouble, someone added a kingdom to that list. But none of this answers the question that matters. All those men, for 1,000 years, called Mary Queen before any pope ordered it. Why? The answer is not in the Middle Ages. It is 1,000 years before Christ, in the throne room of a king. Around the year 1000 before Christ, in Jerusalem, there was an office at court that most readers of the Bible go straight past without seeing. In the kingdoms of Judah, the queen was not the king's wife. She was his mother. The office had a name in Hebrew, Gibira, which means great lady. And it was not an affectionate nickname. It was a function of the court with an assigned place. The Gibira wore a crown. She had a throne of her own, set at the right hand of the king's throne. And she had one specific duty, which is the one that matters to this story. It was to her that the people brought the requests they wanted to make to the king. There was a practical reason for that, and it is far too human to be forgotten. The kings of that world had many wives. A mother, only one. Now, step into the scene that founded it all. King Solomon is in the palace, seated. He is the most powerful man in the region, son of David, the one to whom Scripture credits a wisdom without equal. The court is gathered, and in comes Bathsheba, his mother. The text of the first book of Kings, chapter 2, verse 19, describes what happens next with the precision of protocol. The king rose to meet her. He bowed down before her. And he had a throne brought for the king's mother, and she sat at his right hand. Stop at those three gestures, because every one of them is a break in etiquette in favor of one single person. The king rises. Nobody rises for a subject. The king bows. Nobody bows before someone beneath him. And the king has a throne brought for her, not a chair. Then Bathsheba begins to speak, and Solomon interrupts her with a sentence that has crossed 3,000 years. Ask my mother, for I will not refuse you. Hold on to that sentence, because it is the heart of this video. Ask my mother, for I will not refuse you. This is not a son being kind to his elderly mother. It is a king declaring publicly before the court that there is one person in that kingdom whose request he will not deny. And notice where she is sitting when she hears it, at his right hand. In the ancient world, the right hand of the throne is not a detail of decoration. It is the place of the one who holds delegated authority. Centuries later, the Creed would say that Christ is seated at the right hand of the Father. It is the same grammar. This is the background the gospel takes for granted.
When the angel Gabriel appears to a young woman in Nazareth in the first chapter of Luke, he does not only say that her son will be important, he says a sentence of dynasty. The Lord God will give him the throne of his father David. He will reign over the house of Jacob forever, and of his kingdom there will be no end.
Read that with the court of Judah in mind, and the song closes on its own. If the son is king of the house of David, then the mother is the Geburah of the house of David. It is not a promotion, it is the description of an office that already existed. In that same chapter, when Mary arrives at her cousin's house, Elizabeth does not say, "my dear," or "my kinswoman." She says, "How is it that the mother of my Lord should come to me?"
Mother of my Lord is a formula of the court. It is like addressing the Queen Mother. And the first Christians read it exactly that way, from very early on. It is worth hearing some of those voices, because they come from 4, 5, 6 centuries after Christ, and not one of them is inventing a new devotion. Saint Ephrem, a Syrian deacon who wrote hymns in the 4th century, asks a question that answers itself. If the throne of the king is already honored, how much more should the mother of the king be honored?
Saint Germanus, Patriarch of Constantinople, writes a sentence that sounds staged. "Be seated, O lady, for it belongs to you to sit in the noblest place." And Saint Ildefonsus, Bishop of Toledo, sums it all up in one line that only works because he knew the court. Lady among the handmaids, queen among the sisters. A fourth voice closes the logic. St. John Damascene says that she became truly Lady of all creation at the moment she became Mother of the Creator. There was no later promotion.
There was no ceremony in heaven. The dignity came together with the yes in Nazareth, inside a village house. In Revelation chapter 12, a great sign appears in heaven. A woman clothed with the sun, with the moon beneath her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. Christian art never let go of that image. Here we have to be honest, because the tradition of the Church reads that woman as Mary, and that reading is legitimate and ancient, but it is not the only one.
The first sense of the text speaks of the people of God, of the whole persecuted church. The two readings have lived side by side for centuries, and anyone who says there is only one is simplifying. Now we have to face the objection, because this channel does not live by hiding the other side. And this is the objection most repeated against everything this video is telling you. In the prophet Jeremiah, chapter 7 and chapter 44, God harshly condemns a worship offered to a queen of heaven.
Cakes baked for her, incense burned, drinks poured out. Whoever quotes that passage usually stops there, and the sentence seems to settle the matter. Except that the Queen of Heaven in Jeremiah is not Mary, who had not been born and would not be born for more than 600 years. It is a female deity of the neighboring peoples, worshipped as a goddess in Judah at that moment. What the prophet condemns is idolatry, people of God baking cake for an idol. And the Catholic answer is not to ignore the text.
It is of a precision that surprises anyone expecting exaggeration. It is written out in so many words in the document that instituted today's feast. In paragraph 37, Pope Pius the 12th writes that in the full, proper, and absolute sense, only Jesus Christ is king, and that Mary shares in the royal dignity in a limited and analogical way, as Mother of Christ, and as associated with the work of the Redeemer. Limited and analogical. She is not a goddess. She is a creature seated at the right hand of the throne, like Bathsheba. And the same document does something rarer still. 5 paragraphs further on, it condemns both excesses in the same place. Paragraph 42 tells preachers to beware of groundless opinions, which go beyond the limits of truth with exaggerations. And, on the other side, it tells them to avoid excessive narrowness in considering the dignity of the Mother of God. A pope writing, in the same paragraph, to those who think it is too little and to those who think it is too much. This is not a document trying to please. It is a document trying to get the measure right. And the measure is that of the court of Judah. Bathsheba was not divine. Nobody burned incense to her. She was a woman who had entry to the throne room, and to whom you could say, in so many words, what you were in need of. That is what those monks were saying in the dark corridor, without knowing they were saying it. They were not promoting a woman. They were carrying a request to the person who, in that kingdom, had the right to hear it.
Read the Salve Regina after you know that scene, and one thing jumps out. The prayer does not ask Mary to solve anything. Read it slowly. It asks her to turn her eyes of mercy toward us, and, after this exile, to show us Jesus. It is exactly the gesture of Bathsheba, not to decide, but to carry, not to grant, but to present it to the Son who decides. Those men in the dark corridor were singing word by word a request made to the mother of the king.
They were not being poetic. They were being precise. In 1954, in Rome, all of this finally became paper, and it came from below. Pius the Twelfth himself writes in paragraph 5 that he was instituting the feast to answer the insistent requests that reached him from every quarter. He was not inventing a devotion. He was recognizing one that had already existed for 1,000 years and had no date on the calendar. In paragraph 6, he says in so many words that what he proposes to the belief of the Christian people is not a new truth. Notice what that means, because it changes the nature of the thing. The Church did not declare a dogma here. She did something more discreet and more stubborn. She put it on the calendar. The feast was born for the 31st of May, to close the month of Mary. It only changed months 15 years later in a reform of the calendar, when the 22nd of August fell vacant. And the 22nd of August is the 8th day after the Assumption.
The arithmetic is a sentence of theology. First, she is taken up into heaven. 8 days later, she is crowned. But the encyclical is only paper. 21 days after signing it, the Pope made the gesture. Step into Rome on that morning of the 1st of November. A very ancient image comes out of the Basilica of St. Mary Major. An icon painted on a thick board of cedar, more than a meter tall, with the dark blue mantle edged in gold, and the Greek letters that say Mother of God. It is a painting that was already old when Rome still had emperors. Tradition says it was this one that St. Gregory the Great carried in procession against the plague in the year 593. And it crosses the city on the shoulders of men, through the street, all the way to the Basilica of St. Peter. A pope could have sent a representative. That is the normal thing. The crowning of an image is almost always done by a nuncio, by a legate, or by the bishop of the place, acting in the pope's name. Pius the Twelfth sent nobody. It was he himself, with his own hands,
who placed the crown on that board of wood and proclaimed her queen. Go to St. Mary Major today and look at the image. It has no crown. The gold the Pope placed there was taken off, and today it sits in a museum case beside other pieces. The image that was crowned Queen of the world in the greatest Marian ceremony of the 20th century is on display exactly as it always was: a mother and a boy, painted on a board. And this is not carelessness. It is the whole doctrine said in an object. Crowning an image gives Mary nothing. She already is what the crown says. The principle comes from a council of the year 787, and it is simple. The honor given to the image passes to the person represented. You do not crown a lady, you crown a piece of cedar, and the honor goes through the wood. Now, if the crown gives her nothing, why were so many of them made? And where did the gold come from? The answer is the most beautiful thing in this story, and it is not from Rome. The ones who began the practice were Capuchin friars on the missions. They received great quantities of jewels donated by the faithful, and at the request of the very people who donated them, had it all melted down into crowns for the images. In other words, the gold in Mary's crowns is almost always the gold of ordinary people. A wedding ring, an earring from a baptism, the chain of someone who died.
3 examples the audience of this channel knows by sight.
In Portugal, the crown of Our Lady of Fatima was made in 1942 with jewels handed over by Portuguese women in thanksgiving for the country having stayed out of the war. More than 1 kilo of gold, thousands of stones, hundreds of pearls, all of it coming out of drawers at home. And that crown holds one piece that is not precious. On the 13th of May, 1981, a man shot Pope John Paul II in St. Peter's Square. The Pope survived and offered the bullet to the Bishop of Leiria. For years, nobody knew what to do with it. Only in 1989 did they decide to fit it into the crown beneath the globe of turquoises. And when they tried, they found that the diameter of the hole matched the diameter of the bullet. The director of studies of the shrine says that this is the true jewel of the crown, the one piece that is not made of precious material.
In Brazil, the crown of Aparecida was donated by Princess Isabel, and it is a replica of the crown she would have worn as queen. She was never queen. The monarchy fell first. The crown the princess never wore sits on the head of a clay image 40 centimeters tall. And in Portugal, once again, in the 17th century, King John IV made the most radical gesture of all. In the middle of a war, he proclaimed Our Lady Queen and Patroness of the kingdom, and laid his own royal crown at the feet of the image in Vila Viçosa.
From then on, the kings of that dynasty never again put a crown on their heads. It came to be carried on a cushion at their side. In the 5th case, the crown was stolen, and it is the hardest of them all. On a night in October of 1909, somebody got into the shrine of Jasna Góra in Poland and took the crowns from the icon of the Black Madonna, along with a dress of pearls. They were crowns almost 200 years old.
And you have to understand what Poland was at that moment. The country was divided among 3 empires and did not exist on the map. A people without a state had just lost the crown of its queen as well. The answer came from Rome, and it is a short sentence from a pope the church now calls a saint. Pius the Tenth said,
I have just learned that Poland weeps. And he ordered new crowns made, with this exclamation: to offer the Holy Mother crowns in place of those that one of my predecessors sent. The new crowns were imposed the following spring. And here is the detail that makes this case worth the whole video. Between the theft and the recrowning, the people kept coming. Nothing changed in the line of pilgrims. The image without gold received exactly the same people. That and the uncrowned icon in Rome say the same thing by two different roads. Something is missing in that Roman basilica, and it closes a circle of more than 600 years. Long before any canonical coronation existed, at the end of the 13th century, an artist named Jacopo Torridi covered the apse of St. Mary Major with an enormous mosaic. The subject is the coronation of the Virgin, Christ and Mary seated on the same throne, inside a medallion of gold, and he placing the crown on her head. That mosaic has been up there ever since, looking down. 6.5 centuries later, it was beneath it that a pope passed, carrying a board of cedar, to do with his hands what the mosaic was already showing on the ceiling. 5 crowns, 4 countries, and the crown does not come down from Rome to the people. It goes up from the people to Rome, which only authorizes what has already been asked for. And today, if you want to crown Mary, you do not need any gold at all. You already do it, and you probably do not know it. Look at the rosary in your hand. It is also called a crown. The Franciscan crown carries the name in its title. The name is no accident. Pius the Twelfth himself, in that document of 1954, called the rosary the mystical crown of the Queen of Heaven. Every decade is one turn. Every turn is a piece of that crown. When you pray the rosary on the bus, your finger moving from bead to bead, you are doing with your hands exactly what those Capuchin friars did with the melted jewels. And the 5th glorious mystery, the last of them all, is the crowning of Mary as Queen of Heaven and Earth. After it, nothing else comes. You finish the rosary right there, and you go straight into the Salve Regina. Do you see the design? The prayer for going to sleep comes right after the mystery of the crown. It has been put together this way for centuries, and almost nobody notices. The cheapest gesture of all has not been told yet. In thousands of parishes, at the end of the month of May, a child climbs onto a little stool and places a crown of flowers on the head of an image. No goldsmith, no decree, no bull. Flowers that will wilt in 3 days. There is a coincidence there that almost nobody knows. That gesture happens at the end of May. In many parishes, on the last Sunday of the month, a few days from the 31st. And the 31st of May was, for 15 years, the official day of the Feast of the Queen. The feast changed months. The gesture stayed where it was. In that same document of 1954, there is a page almost nobody reads, because it is at the end, where the eyes are already tired. The Pope writes about people in prison. He says, in so many words, that in some regions of the earth there are those who are unjustly persecuted because of the Christian name and find themselves deprived of the divine and human rights of freedom. Anyone who read that in that year knew exactly which regions he was talking about. Half of Europe was behind a curtain, and whole churches prayed in hiding. The expression people used was the Church of Silence. And he asks that the rosary be prayed in the churches, in the homes, and he names 2 more places that nobody would expect in a document about royalty: in the hospitals and in the prisons. Think about that scene for a second. A document that spends 40 paragraphs speaking of a throne, of a crown, and of royal dignity ends by ordering prayer in a cell. The whole thing was never about gold. A queen mother in that ancient court served one function only: to receive the request of the one who had no way of reaching the king. People in prison, people who are sick, people without rights. That is exactly the line. And the last image in the document is not a crown. It is a rainbow. The Pope asks that this feast serve to preserve peace among the peoples, and he chooses as his sign that arc of colors, which in Scripture appears after the flood, when the water goes down and God promises he will not destroy again. And notice something about that child on the little stool. She knows nothing of what this video has told.
She knows nothing of the court of Judah, nothing of Cluny, and she does not know that a pope crossed Rome on foot with a board of cedar on his shoulders. She is only holding flowers in her hand, with an adult holding her waist so she does not fall. And her gesture is exactly the same as that of the Capuchins with the melted gold, and of the king who left his crown on the floor of Villa Viçosa, and of the princess who had a replica made of the crown she never wore.
All of them were saying the same sentence without a single word: "This which is mine is yours." So tonight, when you finish the rosary and come to the last prayer, do something different. Do not pray it fast. Notice that the first name you give her is Queen. Notice that you are doing what monks did in a dark corridor 800 years ago, on their way to sleep. Notice that it is the same chant the Church will sing over the coffin of a priest. And then remember Bathsheba walking into the throne room and her son rising to receive her. That is what you are doing when you pray the Salve Regina. You are carrying a request to the Mother of the King. If this story stayed with you, let it reach one more person. Our Lady, Queen, Mother of our King, pray for us.